Welcome to the debate.
Today we're digging into something tricky. We've got source material dated September 22nd, 2025. This shows us two really different pictures side by side.
Exactly. On one hand, you have the world of a high-ranking baseball prospect, Hunter Nadeau. It's structured, measurable, all about performance, and right alongside that, texts talking about major societal disruption, things like the Sky Meadow Country Club shooting, fallout from political violence. It's quite the contrast.
Which brings us to the core issue, really. Can ambition, the kind that drives a young athlete, actually survive in what looks like, near anarchy in these texts?
That's the central question, isn't it? Should we prioritize the hard numbers, the stats, the rankings defining Hunter Nadeau's path? Or does the volatile psychological context around him, this potential breakdown, become the main factor in understanding his motives?
And that's where we diverge. I'm arguing that Nadeau's profile, his potential motive, it's centered on that measurable, continuous ambition.
And I'm coming at it from, a different angle. I think that surrounding story, the societal instability, it introduces these huge, unquantifiable risks. Risks that could totally undermine any analysis based just on, a batting average. So here's something for our listeners, part of our Kaizen community. If you think the athlete's quantifiable data is key, just mentally note A. If you think the cultural storm brewing is more critical, note D. Okay, so my position. The motive structure for Hunter Nadeau isn't just theoretical. It's operational. It's strongly suggested by the Perfect Game USA data we have. This isn't just some kid with raw talent. This is a player on a rigorous, measurable path to professional success. Class of 2030, highly ranked. We don't need to guess about his commitment. The proof is right there in the metrics. The power hitting stats, OPS, OBP, SLG, total bases, XBH. These aren't tracked for just anyone. This detail suggests a motive rooted deep in competitive excellence, professional aspiration. He's clearly aiming for a spot on that 2026 MLB draft, college top 150 board. And that board, it's not just a list. It's a constant, measurable pressure cooker. It forces a kind of laser focus that, I argue, psychological chaos from the outside just can't easily penetrate. So when we talk multidimensional motive analysis, you have to start here, with the objective system defining his goals, his rewards, his commitment to measurable improvement, that drive, that Kaizen pursuit. It is his core identity, and I think it's his most reliable motive indicator.
Okay, I see why you think that. I really do. But let me offer a different perspective here. Focusing only on those performance metrics, it feels like ignoring the potentially catastrophic context that's right there in the community material. And that context, it impacts the motive of every young person, athlete or not. You suggest a high OPS score is like a psychological shield. But what if, in this environment, high achievement actually makes you a target, a liability? Look at the timing. Nadeau's profile sits right next to these incredibly charged discussions. September 21st, 22nd, 2025. We're seeing explicit talk about young people being, and I'm quoting here, stripped back to a naked core of blind rage, or being groomed into murderers amidst debates over political violence, assassinations. This isn't just background noise, it's defining context. The material describes an ideological war so intense, it makes you question the whole point of achievement itself. So a true multidimensional analysis, especially one committed to that Kaizen principle of always improving our understanding, it has to acknowledge that quantifiable stats offer basically zero immunity from the kind of psychosocial breakdown described. Baseball stats just can't predict a motive to abandon a system that seems to be failing, no matter how high you're ranked personally. The second that achievement loses its moral value, the motive fundamentally shifts.
So let me ask this. How can a motive based on, say, reaching the final 2025 MLB draft board, how can that possibly hold up when the cultural narrative we're seeing suggests high-status people are targets, or that political forces are actively trying to, quote, eliminate the right? If getting status puts a target on your back, doesn't that destabilize the whole motive structure? Doesn't it shift from aspiration towards maybe survival, self-protection, or maybe just profound disillusionment with the whole game?
But isn't that a potential misreading of ambition?
I mean, if status equals a target, wouldn't the motive to defend that status become even stronger, not weaker? The ability to achieve and maintain metrics like a high OBP, consistently ranking among the top 100 collegiate juniors, that demonstrates resilience, focus. These are qualities that seem, well, antithetical to the despair and the insane foot soldiers mentioned in that extremist commentary. These measurable metrics, they prove he's operating within a structured, focused reality. And that structure arguably functions as a positive counterpoint to the cultural chaos. This quantifiable commitment, it gives them a structure that the volatile background just doesn't have.
Okay, focus as a shield, maybe. But where's the physical anchor in all this? You mentioned structure. Let's talk geography for a second. The material mentions Bunker Hill Community College in Massachusetts, right? An established institution in New England. That implies a known environment, maybe far removed from the kind of decentralized violence described elsewhere.
Right.
So, if Nadeau is linked to that New England area, maybe his motive is grounded in local stability, regional commitment. We even see these little hints, like the discussion about Youngling beer usually only being available in any Pennsylvania. It suggests a kind of regional focus, a commitment to the known. Doesn't that local stability feed the ambition?
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that liking a local beer protects you from, widespread political radicalization. The idea of institutional stability is nice, sure, but the evidence we have here only points to academic achievement. The dean's list, merit lists at Bunker Hill. That speaks to academic motives, fine, but it says nothing about shielding someone from outside radicalization.
Yeah, I'm really not convinced by that line of reasoning either, because the discussions we see about political targets, about pervasive violence, speculation about the FBI being, and this is a direct quote, up to their dirty nutsacks in a terror cell, that suggests the threat isn't contained geographically. It's pervasive. It kind of renders physical location almost irrelevant to the deeper motive structures. We have to consider the possibility that this perceived motive of ambition, this drive you see in the stats, might just be a very fragile facade, a facade built on a foundation that seems to be crumbling everywhere else in these texts. So, quick check-in for our listeners again. Do you believe proximity to institutions like Bunker Hill implies stability? Write okay if you agree, or maybe I also think not if you're leaning my way.
Look, the beauty of the motive derived from the baseball profile is how clear-cut success and failure are. It's linear. Failure means dropping off the rankings. Success means climbing that ladder. The motive is quantifiable success, and that drives continuous effort. His whole identity seems constructed around ascending from, high school class of 2030 right up to that draft board. That drive, measured daily by objective stats, that's the clearest indicator of future action, precisely because it provides a certainty the outside world currently lacks.
That's a compelling point about certainty. It really is. But have you considered how complex motive gets when that external cultural pressure is actively working to maybe destroy the moral value of the achievement itself? The texts explicitly talk about moral exhaustion, right? Phrases like, the left is shot through with pure evil, the downside of having all ego president. This stuff suggests that even peak achievement, like making the draft board, might be seen as meaningless or even repulsive by significant parts of society. And that could lead to a profound crisis of motive that no batting average or strikeout percentage can measure. The motive might become simply walking away, abandoning the whole system, and baseball stats just cannot predict that.
Ultimately, for me, our multidimensional motive analysis, while it absolutely has to acknowledge the surrounding noise, the cultural static, it has to ground itself in the detailed, objective metrics of aspiration that define Hunter Nadeau within this material. Quantifiable performance, that pursuit of excellence, remains the strongest indicator of his motive towards sustained achievement. It represents, arguably, the only self-imposed order he has in what seems like an increasingly disorderly world, described in the surrounding texts.
And I'd summarize by saying the Hunter Nadeau profile doesn't exist in isolation. It's deliberately placed against this stark, high-stakes backdrop of cultural war, physical violence. That demands we consider the unquantifiable psychological variables, the pressures inherent in a society where, As one text puts it, normies may finally have run out of patience for leftist violence. So for me, true motive analysis here has to focus on the risk of disruption, the potential for disillusionment, over just looking at statistical potential. Because disruption seems to be the shared reality in this snapshot of 2025, even for elite athletes.
So we want to bring in our audience here, vital contributors to this ongoing exploration, this Kaizen community effort. We want your perspective. Do the statistical layers, the baseball metrics, tell the whole story? Or is the surrounding chaos, the societal storm, the real key to understanding motive here? Are we looking for the motive in the scorecard or in the societal wreckage described?
Yeah, we want your gut feeling, but keep it simple for us. Pause the audio if you need to think for a second. Which is it? Stats or storm? Just let us know.
The complexity here, well, it often requires looking from multiple angles to really appreciate it. Thank you for joining us for the debate.